How will the TV series Garlasco 3 end? On the 18th anniversary of the death of poor Chiara Poggi, many are wondering how this television series will end, and I personally believe I can confirm my answer to this question, guided by the stars, which are absolutely independent, apolitical, and objective beyond belief. First, observe the victim's next solar return chart, erected for Garlasco or Milan. It's the same. In my life, I have studied many thousands of natal charts and solar returns, which I remember are always targeted regardless of the subject's intentions, but I recall only a few cases like this one in which so many bad positions are concentrated together. So, I repeat from my observatory, which is 100% astrological, since I began studying this horrific murder, I have had many confirmations of my premises. Alberto Stasi is Chiara Poggi's murderer, and his guilt is 100% likely. Andrea Sempio is completely innocent in this affair. The three solid pieces of evidence: the DNA of the new old suspect around the victim's fingernails, fingerprint 33, and the presence of his accomplice, represented by the DNA in the poor girl's mouth, are falling and will fall like ripe pears, and Andrea Sempio will emerge from this affair completely innocent, but not unscathed. Following an unprecedented press campaign, with hours of nearly 24-hour coverage on major national TV channels, we will proceed with what, in my opinion, has been the true purpose of this reality show from the beginning: a review of the trial. This review will not prove Stasi's innocence, but will prove that there were several anomalies in the investigation that led to his conviction. Therefore, Stasi, in defiance of the law and by popular acclaim, will be acquitted and generously compensated by the state. This is what Chiara Poggi's RSM, scheduled for March 31st, 2026, discusses. The stars, which are absolutely objective and take no orders from anyone, tell us of a victim who, at the end of the events I'm narrating, will be murdered a second time. There's no other possible explanation, reading facts that could not be clearer. Let's briefly reconstruct these facts for the benefit of the distracted and the very distracted. As the suspect's lawyers have repeatedly reiterated, they didn't start from, say, some crappy piece of evidence, such as an email in which Andrea Sempio and the victim arranged to meet the next morning or something of the sort. No, they started from nothing. Worse, from the accusatory theory of some private investigators paid by Alberto Stasi to prove Andrea Sempio's guilt. We were told that the greatest living geneticist working on a new test was able to definitively demonstrate the presence of Sempio's DNA on Chiara Poggi's fingernails. We won't have to wait until October 24th or any other date to find out how this supposedly unshakable proof will end. Miserably. Then there was talk of print 33, which, according to a team of scientists, consultants to Alberto Stasi, would demonstrate through photographs that not only was the print truly Sempio's, but that it was soaked in blood and sweat when it was imprinted on the white wall next to the girl's body. On this last point, the most utter nonsense has been said, starting with the notion that if an experiment can be repeated in a laboratory, then it's scientific. Let's ignore the epistemological background of these storytellers and try to clarify the aforementioned proof. But how can we do that if we don't have the report from these scientists? We can do this because the theoretical foundations of the experiment already condemn it, right from the start, to fail miserably in court. Let's see. I'll give you an example to help you understand what we're talking about. Look at this image. It's the work in progress page I was working on a couple of years ago for the cover of my book Crimes and Crimes 2. As you can see, I had designed the cover in a midnight blue, a very dark blue, and when I delivered the book to Amazon for printing, I didn't rely on descriptions and adjectives so that the American multinationals printers would accurately render the color I had chosen. No, absolutely not. I sent them a PDF which, as everyone knows, contains the various codes for obtaining, even after years, the same colors for the cover, the back cover photo, and so on. In my case, I chose the color from the RGB code. RGB is an acronym for red, green, black, red, green, and black, the three main colors from which all the others are obtained. I had chosen RGB 4, red, 62, green, and 101, black, which, when mixed together, create a midnight blue, a very dark blue like the one you see in the picture. Everything okay? Not at all. The book, as you can see from the image here, was printed in mouse gray. But that doesn't really matter because that's not what I'm getting at. Amazon's printing problem repeated with both my book Crimes and Crimes and my other book Crimes and Crimes 2 resulted in dark gray covers instead of dark blue, given an RGB color code of 462-101. It doesn't matter, and I don't even have time to start a war with Amazon to complain about it. But I'll try to explain my point. If the code, instead of 4,62,100, had been 4,62,100, do you think anyone would have noticed the difference by sight? This is the key point. The Stasi experts declared they were able to distinguish and therefore use this as absolute proof between different photos of fingerprints left on a white wall by a clean hand and a sweaty, bloody hand. It's science fiction, and let's see why. To speed up the example, I asked ChatGPT to summarize the essence of the problem in a few lines. What color would you define as an RGB of 462-101? ChatGPT said, the color with RGB values, 462-101, is a dark blue, rather cool and saturated. Red, 4, almost 0. Green, 62, moderate. Blue, 101, predominant. This mix creates a shade similar to a very dark petrol blue, close to midnight blue but with a barely perceptible greenish touch. In hexadecimal it would be number 043E65. Could you name 10 substances that, when scattered on a white wall, could give rise to this color? ChatGPT said, to achieve a color close to RGB 462-101 on a white wall, a very dark, cool, and slightly greenish petrol blue, you need to use pigments or powders that absorb almost all red light, reflect a good portion of the blue and some green. Here are 10 substances that alone or combined could produce an effect very close to this. 1. Prussian blue, ferric ferrocyanide, dark intense mineral pigment tending toward green in certain mixtures. 2. Phthalocyanine blue, PB15, very powerful organic pigment with a greenish undertone. 3. Dark ultramarine blue, synthetic. Deep blue needs to be darkened slightly to get closer. 4. Synthetic indigo absorbs red well with dull bluish reflections. 5. Dark cerulean blue, cobalt stannite, mixed with black yields of petroleum blue. 6. Manganese blue. Cool shade can be toned down with carbon black. 7. Hydrated chromium oxide pigment, dark blue-green, useful for shifting blues toward petroleum. 8. Carbon black pigment, to darken any blue without significantly altering its undertone. 9. Dark cobalt blue, intense and light-fast with a hint of green. 10. Egyptian blue, calcium copper silicate. In a thick dark layer, it can be toned down to any desired tone. Now, to help you understand what we're talking about even better, pay attention to item 9, where it says, with a hint of green. Can any of you experienced readers tell me how many variations of touch of green are theoretically possible? I'll tell you. 256 variations of green. 256 different shades of green within a midnight blue. Be patient and try to keep following me. Now let's move away from the midnight blue with shades of green of the aforementioned cover and toward the red of the bloody fingerprint, which will have hundreds and hundreds of different intensities of red, depending on the hemoglobin concentration in the blood. Here's a clarification ChatGPT requested and received. What is the main factor that determines the red color of human blood? The hemoglobin level? ChatGPT said, yes, the main factor that determines the red color of human blood is hemoglobin itself. More precisely, the concentration of hemoglobin in the blood greatly affects the intensity of the red. Low hemoglobin, as in anemia, makes the blood lighter, less saturated. The chemical state of hemoglobin is even more decisive. For the color, O-oxyhemoglobin, hemoglobin bound to oxygen, bright, brilliant red, as in arterial blood. O-deoxyhemoglobin without oxygen, dark red, tending towards blue-purple, as in venous blood. O-carboxyhemoglobin bound to carbon monoxide, intense cherry red. O-methemoglobin, oxidized form Fe3+, reddish brown. So, the quantity of hemoglobin, grams per deciliter, influences the saturation and brightness of red. The how the hemoglobin is found, oxygenated, reduced, oxidized, influences the precise hue. Now imagine that the experts for the parties in the trial appeared before a judge. And let's say that Stasi's experts in this specific case say, Your Honor, the photographic print certainly belongs to Andrea Sempio because it is proven that he, often about 20 years ago, had a hemoglobin value X that has the color we photographed on the wall. And the judge, what color? Which of the thousands of colors identifiable with the same RGB? Is it clear? If not, you're acting in bad faith. Obviously, I've used the example of hemoglobin red here with a specific RGB and limited the discussion to only the first 10 possible theoretical variations. But we could go as far as hundreds and hundreds of different shades if, to the variables just mentioned, we also add the factory calibrated settings of the various cameras for the default color temperature and 100 more parameters. And do you really think a judge would accept as evidence this little game that lawyer Massimo Lovati, who turns 73 today and to whom we offer our best wishes, wittily called the little alchemist's game? The third rock-solid piece of evidence, the one that would have demonstrated the presence of another murderer, an accomplice of Stasi, who attacks and accuses his accomplice, and Sempio at the crime scene has just fallen, and the Pavia prosecutor's office. He did well to withdraw it before being inundated with thousands of protests of all kinds. So the stars don't lie and can't lie. Never! And they have already spoken out. Alberto Stasi is absolutely guilty, regardless of the fact that procedural errors were committed in the investigation. But above all, because we have been shown him several times a day, from March until today, crying alongside his mother, who was also crying, and that cannot be tolerated in Italy, and it wouldn't take an astrologer to say that the convicted man must, above all for this, be rehabilitated and compensated. Andrea Sempio was, is, and will remain absolutely innocent and innocent of the whole affair. In the end, he will emerge clean, but his health will be severely affected, and for this reason he will not receive any compensation. The only truly great mystery that will remain in this story is why the prosecutor's office, represented by a highly authoritative magistrate, wanted all this. Perhaps on this question, not even the stars will ever be able to enlighten us. Ciro Discepolo, Milan, August 13th, 2025.